Welcome everyone to a new episode of You Don't Jazz No Berries, where today we are bringing light to the darkest of stories. Today's tale is about a young lady whose life was cut short. It's Lady Karus here today for our first murder mystery episode. I will be bringing you the facts that are known about Sydney Loofe and what happened to this young lady when her life was cut short. Then leave it in your capable hands to form your own opinion of what may or may not have happened. In this new episode, Season 2, Episode 5, A Life Cut Short, the story of Sydney Loofe. You may be wondering who is Sydney Loofe, so let's go ahead and start off with what we know about her based off information that I was able to pull from Wikipedia. Sydney was born on August 21st, 1993 in Broken Bow, Nebraska. She grew up in Arcadia, Nebraska and moved to Neely in 2000. Sydney's parents are George W. and Susie Loofe, and Sydney was one of 3 children. She graduated high school in 2011 in Neely, Nebraska, and moved to Lincoln, Nebraska and started working at Menards. On November 15th, 2017, Sydney Loofe went on a Tinder date, which was the second date with Audrey. And I will get into who Audrey is here shortly. Sydney never came back from her date that night and didn't show up at work the following day, November 16th of 2017. Co-workers became worried about Sydney's absence as they said it wasn't like her not to show up for work after several calls and texts weren't answered by Sydney from co-workers, and her parents were getting more concerned. First, her co-workers called the police and had them do a wellness check on her. But the police did not find anything out of place at Sydney's apartment, and her car was still in the parking lot. Her parents went to the apartment and saw the cat didn't have any food or water, which was unusual because Sydney loved her cat and wouldn't leave that cat there for a long period of time without any food or water. Before going on this date, Sydney had confided in one of her close friends, Brooklyn McChrystal, about going on a Tinder date with a girl named Audrey. Once Brooklyn discovered that Sydney was missing, she got on Tinder to find Audrey. She reached out to Audrey on Tinder and got her phone number, which Brooklyn delivered directly to the local police. The Saline County Police were able to pin down the location of where Sydney's phone last pinged with the help of the FBI. So you may be wondering, why did the FBI get involved in Sydney's disappearance? With community support, there were blasts on social media, the news, and missing person posters, causing Sydney's disappearance to become headlines. How could this happen in Nebraska? The FBI took notice and joined the investigation, coordinating with local police departments. Sydney's phone's last location was in Wilbur, Nebraska. With further research, the police discovered this was a duplex where Bailey Boswell, aka Audrey from Tinder, and Aubrey Trail lived. On November 28, 2017, Aubrey and Bailey became persons of interest in the disappearance of Sydney. The police showed up at their duplex 2 times, both times coming up empty-handed. They reported not seeing Bailey or Aubrey and a strong smell of bleach, but nothing else at the property seemed out of the ordinary. So what's some background on Bailey Boswell? Bailey was raised in Leon, Iowa. She was really good at sports, from track to basketball, and was even offered a college basketball scholarship. She didn't take the scholarship and instead turned to substance abuse. She was in a relationship with a physically abusive spouse. Bailey had 1 daughter who was taken at a young age due to an unstable household. Her and her spouse separated, and Bailey later hit up Aubrey Trail on a sex marketplace website called Backpage. She told him that she was looking for a sugar daddy. Bailey put herself on Tinder going by the name of Audrey, where she met Sydney Loofe. At the time of Sydney's disappearance, Bailey was 23 years old. So, who is Aubrey Trail? Information on Aubrey Trail was a little bit harder to find. Wikipedia didn't state where Aubrey was born, but that he had a rough childhood. He was said to have a history of being abused as a child, moving from one foster home or juvenile facility to another. When he was a teenager, he was put in prison for armed robbery. He later met Bailey Boswell and they became a couple living in a duplex in Wilbur, Nebraska. During the time of Sydney's disappearance, Aubrey Trail was 51 years old. So what happened to Sydney? The FBI and local police tried to reach out to Bailey and Aubrey, who responded with a Facebook video post. Here's a little snip of the first video post on Facebook.
Hi, good morning. I'm Bailey, Audrey on Tinder, and a few other names because I have warrants, but this really isn't about me. This is about Sydney, and I'm just kind of want to tell you what I've already told the Lincoln police more than one time. I met her on a Tuesday. We drove around Lincoln, smoked weed, had a great time. We hit it off. I dropped her off at home, picked her up the next night at her house. We drove around, smoked weed again, made our way to my house where we smoked wax and shatter, and I gave her a 1/4 ounce of some really good weed. I went to take her home, and she asked me to drop her off at a friend's house.
There was a second video post on Facebook that was made by Aubrey Trail, and here's a short snip of that video.
Hi folks, Aubrey Trail here. Few little things I want to talk about. I've been watching all day. I just watched the news. That's why I'm making this. First thing I want to clarify is the news just reported that our contact with the police in Lincoln never took place.
I did also put a link below in the description to the full YouTube videos if you'd like to watch those. You can see in the video that Bailey said that she saw Sydney for 2 dates, and on the second one, they smoked some marijuana and she dropped her off at a friend's house after the second date. Both Bailey and Aubrey denied being involved in Sydney's disappearance, saying Sydney was a sweet girl and they hope she is found soon. On November 30th, 2017, both Bailey and Aubrey were arrested at a motel in Branson, Missouri, on different charges that were related to fraud. When they were arrested, the police found sleeping bags and hiking shoes, which they believed was going to be used for them to escape to Mexico. The search for Sydney came to a devastating end for her friends and family on December 4th of 2017 when her remains were found. I will warn you, what I'm about to say might be gruesome, but I'm only bringing forward the facts. Sydney's body was dismembered and put in several 30-gallon trash bags alongside a gravel road just north of Edgar, Nebraska, which is about 1 hour west of Wilbur, Nebraska, where her cell phone was last pinged. All of her remains were said to have been found, except for part of her upper arm, which has not been found to this day. In June of 2019, Aubrey Trail pleaded guilty on only the charge of improper disposal of human remains. Towards the end of June, Aubrey was in court and tried to commit suicide by cutting his own throat. He yelled, "Bailey is innocent and I curse you all." He was taken to the hospital and missed a significant amount of trial due to this. When he returned to trial, a lot of evidence was presented by prosecution along with several witnesses. So what evidence was presented and what did the witnesses say? There were several videos from different stores before and after the murder had occurred of Trail and Boswell buying saws, 30-gallon trash bags, bleach, cotton cord, Drano, and a trash bin. One video here was shown by the prosecution during court with several of the stores that were visited and what was bought. You can see also an encounter at Menards where Sydney and Aubrey were both entering and exiting around the same time in Lincoln, Nebraska. This is where Sydney worked the day of her murder. A motel was also purchased the day before Bailey and Sydney's second date in Lincoln, Nebraska by Aubrey and Bailey. Several witnesses from the stores testified that the receipts from the purchases that day matched the barcodes on the items that were found by Sydney's remains. There was also testimony from 3 women that were in a sexual relationship with Aubrey and Bailey. Most of them cited meeting Bailey on Tinder and getting paid to have a relationship with her and Aubrey. One woman even stated that Aubrey told her that he wanted her to become part of their cult, and to do so, she would have to kill another woman. It's uncertain who exactly they wanted her to kill, but they had stated it was another woman that they dated off of Tinder. One witness stated that Aubrey called all of the women in the cult witches, and Bailey was the queen witch. These witnesses also cited Bailey and Aubrey had fantasies of videotaping their victims as they were tortured and murdered. There was a letter that was a cipher by Aubrey and sent to Bailey in jail. The police were able to decipher it and find that Aubrey was trying to get his and Bailey's stories straight. He wanted to take full responsibility for the murder and have Bailey say that she was forced to participate in the murder. The defense portrayed that this was just a sexual kink gone wrong, and they tried to portray Sydney as a willing participant in the choking causing her own death. They also portrayed Sydney as a drug addict on cocaine and used several pictures they found on her social media to defame her character. They brought up Trail's childhood and history of being abused as well. In June of 2021, Trail was sentenced to the death penalty only after a few hours of deliberation by the jury. They convicted him with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper disposal of human skeletal remains. He sought a new trial, but his request was rejected. Bailey requested to have her trial in a different location due to prejudice, and was granted to have her trial in Lexington, Nebraska. She was sentenced to life in prison after one of 3 judges cited her actions did not meet the standard of exceptional depravity needed for imposing the death penalty. Later, Aubrey and Bailey were sentenced in separate cases for defrauding hundreds of thousands of dollars from interstate coin buyers. Currently, Bailey Boswell is an inmate at Nebraska Correctional Center for Women in York, Nebraska, and Trail is on death row at Tecumseh State Correctional Institution in Tecumseh, Nebraska. I have presented you with all of the details and will let you formulate your own opinion about what actually transpired during the days before and after Sydney's disappearance and eventual murder. Sydney passed away at the young age of 24. I give my condolences to her family and friends, as her life was truly a life taken too soon.